This video is on the layers palette in Photoshop. It's kind of the key palette that we'll be using in our time in Photoshop. So when we open an image, right, I've just opened an image, you'll see that we have it just has one layer, it has this background, it has this weird lock symbol, but this is the layers palette right here, and this is the important thing to know. Now with this layers palette, our main tool is this move tool, right? And if I go to move it right now, I'll get this, hey, you can't move a background layer, right? A background layer is actually technically kind of a special thing in Photoshop. Now you see I have an option. I can convert it to a normal layer from a background layer if I go to do that. So I'll go ahead and hit that, and it will actually then do my move that I want it to, right? That's not the only way to do that, right? Let me go back. This is the history palette. I can actually go back to the beginning. It doesn't hold infinite steps, so just be aware that it's not always available to you to do all these things. I can actually then drag this into, this is the new layer button, but if I hold and drag this in, you'll see I'll make a copy of it, and I can then drag this into the trash and have a normal one, right? Another way that I can handle the background layer, I think, is to right-click on it and say layer from background. I can change the name if I really want to, and it becomes this, right? So that's handling the background layer. What else can we do in this? Well, I can make a new layer. So this is the new layer button down here, this little square with an upturned page, and when you see these checkerboard pattern, that means transparency. It means there's nothing there, right? So this is an empty layer, there's nothing there, right? So say I want to draw make a little drawing, some graffiti on this. Well, I mean, if I wanted to, I could just draw on that same layer. Let me get something here and just like, well, let me get something even a better color so we can see it, right? Right? I could go graffiti this wall. The problem is if I'm drawing on this layer, right, I've permanently done that and I can't move these layers. I don't want to do that. I want to make a new layer and draw on it there. Yay, right? And then I could, I have this on a separate layer, so whoops, I can actually go grab it and move it around, right? I can go ahead and change its size a little bit down, right? We don't res up, only down. And work on it there, right? That's a handy thing. I can take a part of another layer and bring it up. So let's see me do that. You're going to learn the marquee tools in Photoshop also very well during this class. So I'm going to turn off this layer 1. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to trash this layer 1, and I have this. And say I want a part of this layer on a new layer. Well, I can make a selection, right? In the Photoshop marquee tools, I can make a circular selection, I can make a square selection, I can draw out a selection with a lasso. There's a lot of different ways to make a selection. And say I want to make a copy of this. Well, what I can do is get that selection, and then the quick key is Command J. I actually don't know where from a selection it is. So if I hit Command J, you'll notice if I turn off this layer, right, the part I've had selected is now above layer via copy. And so, right, you can see how that can be very useful for doing something. And now if I wanted to change the, see where it is, I could change the blending mode. Other things that we do in the layers palette, in a later video, you'll see about making an adjustment layer through right here. Later on in a further class, we'll talk about layer masks, which we'll use this button. But really, your layers palette is kind of this main command thing. Unlike Illustrator, where we don't really use the layers palette as much, in Photoshop, we're constantly in the layers palette. You'll also notice other things in a layer, right? I can toggle the visibility on and off of a layer. I can rename a layer to whatever I want, right? That's just for cleanliness sake. And there's a lot more, but we're not going to get into how powerful the things that we can do in this class, right? This is an intro to Photoshop. But for right now, what you need to know is that, is working with layers. I'm going to let you know one more gotcha that students all wind up happening here. So say I duplicate a layer, and now I have this layer on top of this layer, and I mean to draw on one. You see how the selection in the layers. If I have this layer selected, anything I do is going to affect that layer. So I don't see anything. Why? Because this layer is in front of it. So I have to copy it, right? I can actually grab a layer and change its order if I wanted to, right? So again, layers are very powerful, and you'll just get used to it as you explore it, right? Another thing, if I have two duplicated layers over each other, and this is another gotcha, and I go with the eraser tool, right? And I want to erase, I start erasing, I'm like, hey, why is my erasing not working? Well, look at the little thumbnail here, right? You see it's working. It just has a duplicated layer right there. So these are things to be aware of as you're working with layers in Photoshop.